is Brian with ScreenFiles.com in review. What I'm looking at today is 1984's Dune, directed by David Lynch. And the only reason I'm doing this is because there's a lot of hullabaloo over Denis Villeneuve's new version, and I wanted to see what Lynch did with it, just to give it a little more perspective. And like I said in my reaction video to the trailer for Villeneuve's movie, I'm not sure what he's doing, in a sense that I get the feeling he's remaking Lynch's Dune, more so than directing a version of Frank Herbert's Dune. Now, you might think there's no difference between those two things, though they are quite distinct. Ask anyone who's actually read Dune, which I have, though not very recently. In any case, Lynch's take on material is fascinating. This movie gets a lot of hate, and I don't really understand it. Not exactly. Well, I do and I don't. In the sense that Lynch's Dune is the closest thing you're going to get to an actual movie-going experience that you're likely to find. It's a truly visionary, remarkable movie. But that's part of its problem. I think that if it had been just a movie first, never mind the accoutrement, if you will. If it were just a movie, I think it would have done much better and would have been better received by most people. And visually is where this movie lives or dies. At the same time, its visual aesthetic is its most striking thing. And my God, for the most part, it is ghastly. It's such an unattractive film, deliberately so. Everything is so ornate and over-designed. Watching it a second time, I almost found it exhausting because there's nowhere for your eyes to rest with this movie. Everything on the screen vies for your attention. There's no quiet in this movie. Even when people aren't talking, there's no quiet in this movie because the background screams at you or the costumes scream at you. It's such an unsubtle movie, and that's probably, I would say, its greatest problem. Its story actually sticks, from what I can recall, relatively faithfully to Frank Herbert's original story. Now keep in mind, Dune is a lot of book, and there's no way a movie can really encapsulate that. In fact, I believe Denis Villeneuve's version is going to be broken into 2 movies. Now I'm not even sure that's enough, frankly. This would have been so much better handled with a 5 or 6 night series on television, as opposed to a movie, which by the very nature of the beast, it's going to cut things. And it should. In fact, I recall it being very ponderous and wordy. And the thing is, what I think Lynch gets right is that he understands the basic nature of the novel, which is to say it's almost like Dallas in space. You have these ruling families, and they're fighting over management of something called millage, which would be akin to oil in the Dallas example. And the spice, it's called the spice, I should say, and it enables space travel. It enables craft to travel light years in a blink of an eye. It's instantaneous travel, which I can see various factions fighting over. It makes perfect sense. And it's interesting how Lynch's interpretation of these things clashes so much with the Star Wars interpretation. A ship with warp drive I don't think would mitigate the spice because, again, it's instantaneous travel. But at the same time, it sure as hell alleviate a lot of these problems. But in any case, let's get back to Dune. It's a relatively simple story. The thing is, like the movie itself, it's so ornate and so padded that it feels bigger than it actually is. And I give Lynch credit for that. He was able to compress that material in a fashion that I thought was really effective and worked, for the most part, reasonably well. Though there are sections of the movie, though, where Lynch had you in people's heads literally, which is to say they'd have a thought and you would hear it on screen. I don't know why he did that. It struck me as really odd, especially since that's what acting is. if a character is going to be scared, act scared. You don't have to have a voiceover saying, I am scared. And there's a lot of that in this movie. And most of it, I think, is unnecessary. Just let the people act. That's what they're there for. So it's odd in a lot of ways. But as I said, on the whole, it's a pretty good movie. It's effective. And though also, as I said, it's visual presentation, the strongest / weakest link, because it's both of them. It's striking to watch it. The backgrounds, the sets, the costumes, they're all gorgeous to look at. But at the same time, they're just oppressive. In fact, if I were to find another word to describe this movie, it would be oppressive. It really is. I actually watched it over 2 nights. And it's not an easy watch by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, I think it's a lot harder to watch than it should be, which is a problem. Dune was produced by, I believe, Dino De Laurentiis, or maybe Raffaella. I believe it was Dino. In any case, it came out in 1984, 4 years after Flash Gordon. And if you look at the 2 movies, the visual aesthetic is just so similar, except that for Flash Gordon, it understands that it's based on a comic. And so it takes itself a little less seriously. It's more garish, it's more outlandish, in a good way. I enjoyed Flash Gordon, especially visually, quite a bit. But Dune takes the same idea, but it doesn't necessarily work in its case, because, as I keep repeating, it's such a ponderous effort. It hurts. That's exaggerated, but not by a lot. It almost hurts to watch this. And that's a pity, because I honestly think it deserves better than it got, both from critics and the box office. It's a fascinating movie. It's interesting to look at, but it's hard to know who it's directed at. From what I've seen, a lot of people who read the novel don't like the movie. And a lot of people who haven't read the novel also don't like the movie. It's not a good mix. Though that brings me back to Villeneuve's Dune. And the problem, at least based upon the trailer, as I see it, namely, I don't know what it's remaking. It doesn't feel like Frank Herbert's novel, which I have to reread. I haven't read it in a while, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like David Lynch's movie. Everything does. And again, I have to emphasize, I'm talking about a trailer. I can't speak for the whole movie because I haven't seen it. And if it's coming out this year, I probably won't see it in theaters in any case. It feels like Villeneuve is addressing the shortcomings of Lynch's movie. And that's an interesting thing to do. I also think it's a dangerous thing to do. Though, what kind of heartens me is that if you've seen Villeneuve's movies, particularly Arrival, but I assume this is present in others as well, he has a very naturalistic visual style. Watching Amy Adams in The Arrival almost reminded me of a shampoo commercial at times. It struck me as very naturalistic, is the best word I can find to describe it, which I think would be a good accent to the overwhelming technologicalness of the Dune universe. Once again, I think Villeneuve is redoing David Lynch's movie, more so than Frank Herbert's Dune. And so I think that would make him, in some ways, a good match. It would help alleviate the oppressive nature of the property. Well, I should say the potential oppressive nature of the property. This is Brian at screenfiles.com in review. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know down below. And since you're there, consider a like or a follow. Peace.